Good morning. I'm Andy Camp, and this is Real Estate Unlocked, episode 4. The title of our episode today is It Is All Noise. And believe me, I really wanted to title this something different, but they told me that since we were posting this on YouTube, I had to not use the words I wanted to use. So we entitled it It's All Noise. And there's a lot of noise out there right now around coming soons, around office exclusives, off MLS listings, and whether or not it actually hurts or helps consumers. So I'm joined today with George Pattison, once again,
thanks for having me,
the guest of our first episode. And we're going to get into talking about office exclusives and off MLS strategies 90 days into Cutler really pushing the Cutler exclusives. But before George and I start, I had a really fun opportunity to talk with Mike Minard, founder and CEO of Delta Media Group and our longtime web partner, and our very own Suzi Stepanovich, who's really been the internal architect of our e-business strategy for the past 30 years. So before George and I get into our conversation about off MLS listings and office exclusives and where the opportunity is in the spring market, we're going to play the interview that I had the pleasure of recording earlier this week. So enjoy. Welcome, everybody. I'm excited to have two guests with me today to talk about all the noise surrounding listings, coming soons, off MLS listings, office exclusives. So big thank you to Mike Minard, founder and CEO of Delta Media Group, a partner of ours for almost 30 years. It's unbelievable in the tech world that we've been partners for almost 30 years. And a woman that needs no introduction, our very own Suzi Stepanovich, our e-business and relocation manager, who has really been the boots on the ground of everything technology here at Cutler Real Estate for pretty much the same 30 years, right? Yep. We've all come up together pretty much. So it's crazy to think about having a relationship, a technology relationship for 30 years when how much has changed just in the last 6 weeks when it comes to the whole noise around listing. So I wanted to have just a conversation of what is fact, what is substance, what really is a good strategy with all this noise, and then what really, is just fluff, just distracting, and why some of the national brands and portals are making some of the decisions that they're making. So before I get into the discussion, I just wanted to kind of do an overall timeline, because it's kind of crazy to think that so much of this has just happened here in 2026. You have the acquisition of Compass and Anywhere, and you had then Compass and Zillow standing off on the access to listings and the whole question around off MLS listings. Zillow, enacted their listing access regulatory oversight and said that any off MLS marketing of listings would be penalized by not being allowed to ever show up on Zillow. Compass sues Zillow. Zillow comes out and says, we will never market coming soon listings. We will never support off MLS listings. It is anti-consumer. And then the first round of discovery and the Compass Zillow lawsuit happens about a month ago. And then lo and behold, Zillow comes out and says, hey, we're going to reintroduce, because keep in mind, Zillow had coming soon back in 2014. Yep. So they reintroduce and repackage it as Zillow Preview. Yeah. And then they announced that national brands like Remax and like Keller Williams and like Berkshire Hathaway were going to launch with them as partners. A few days later, Realtor.com and Homes.com said that, you know what, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to have a coming soon feature, and we're going to launch with EXP. And then a few days later, Compass drops their lawsuit with Zillow. Now we have regional MLSs that are countersuing Compass for not following clear cooperation and marketing, off MLS listings. So with all that being said, I think it's a bunch of BS noise. I think that the the press release and the big deal that Zillow made out of coming soons and marketing them really gives you, most brokers in Ohio, less than a 24-hour advantage of pre-marketing.
Yeah.
Realtor.com, homes.com, exactly the same thing. So with all that being said, what do you think is happening? What's the motivation? And what is the real strategy that realtors should be focusing on right now? I'm going to start with you, Mike.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, so this is it's strange times, and I get to in some ways sit on the sidelines a little bit where I'm the tech end of the industry and I continually shake my head at a lot of the things that have happened because I do remember this would have been approximately 24 years ago. We launched our pocket listing system, is what we called it at the time.
Yep.
Oh my goodness, you would have thought that we had such an uproar when we launched that you can't do that. It's yeah, and we had really good intentions with it. But at the end of the day, I mean, this my opinion is, and I think this is well founded. It's all driven by money. All of this
Yep.
is 100% driven by money. And but at the end of the day, from a technical perspective, none of this is new. You pointed out the Zillow, the make me move or make me sell, however they were branding it on and off over the years. I kept asking, how is this not in violation of MLS rules and regulations? But then again, they weren't commingling the listings on the display, but they were pushing the MLSs to commingle it, is how I understood it. Well, we've evolved to this a couple years later. And I mean, this is nothing new. We've seen this, but I'm not sure how this is going to play out. I don't, there's so much wrangling going on, and it depends on the market. I think, like Andy, this in our world where I live, Northeast Ohio, this market is a little bit different in the sense of these types of pre-marketing, or this concept of pre-marketing of listings has been very common in some markets, like down in Florida, some of the coastal areas, where they would put it out there, but it was more of a pricing. If in those markets they thought a listing would sell at 2 million, well, let's quietly market it off MLS at 2.4 and see if anyone buys. And then they do.
So that's an interesting point, because a lot of the noise around off MLS listings is that it's anti-consumer to not be fully transparent about pricing or not be fully transparent about days on market. Like, what's your opinion of that?
Well, I'm a data person. I like the data. From a consumer perspective, if I was a seller, I would love it because you don't get the stigma of it was listed at 2.4 and you did all these price reductions and it finally sold at 2. Because then the perception, and wrongfully so in most cases, is what's wrong with that
What's
listing.
wrong?
Right.
So where really it was, and this is, what realtors deal with every single day. What's my home worth? Well, it's worth what someone's willing to pay for it.
Sure.
And it's, which is, and the battle that goes on with home sellers and what they think it's worth versus reality. So I think from a customer perspective, it just depends on which side of the aisle you're on. From a buyer, you're trying to buy low. A seller, you're trying to sell high. I mean, that's just Econ 101. I mean, I don't.
Well, and one of the other interesting things that we've seen, so we really launched a push for our Cutler exclusives in January, and we've seen about 110% increase in Cutler exclusives over the last 90 days. But what's interesting is the most consistent feedback I've gotten isn't necessarily on pricing. It's on buyers being so excited about having access to a good buyer agent who has off MLS
100%.
inventory, because they don't have to be in competition and they're willing to pay a premium not to be in competition. And that's an interesting dynamic that, at least here in Ohio, we would not have talked about until the pandemic happened and the housing frenzy afterwards. And that's where I see both sides of it, but I keep coming back. And you said this, first, Mike, it's all about money,
right.
But nobody's talking about the consumer, as it relates to this, and that's where I think we get a little lost with all the noise is, okay, are we on an individual basis having a one-on-one conversation about what our consumer wants, whether it's a buyer or seller? And I think that's where the haze of MLS regulations and portals motivations and large, national company, publicly traded companies motivations. I think that's where it gets lost. And, candidly, that's where all the noise should be pushed aside, and that's where our focus should be, don't you think?
I do. I also think that the reverse prospecting component of this is something that's not being talked about a whole lot, but I think that's the play that Compass is doing. Their play is the reverse prospecting. They're selling it as, we have X millions of home shoppers at your disposal. Well, so does every well-run platform. Your site alone, you have millions of
Right.
home shoppers. And the reverse prospecting component of it is the, I guess, the dynamic that has not been fully, I'll say, solved industry wide. I'll phrase it that way because you get into protection, where individual realtors, rightfully so, want to protect their database of home, people looking for a home, and we've tried to do ecosystems over the years to facilitate that, but it's still something sticky to navigate. Because even if you get into cross brands, and I think that's ultimately, I think that's what drove, some of the recent acquisitions or mergers, however you want to phrase it, is they're trying to combine that ecosystem of, I guess, the reverse prospecting databases and access to it, which is why they're going to force adoption of platforms as well, because that's what pays for the acquisition and merger, is getting those additional sides. So I think this is all playing out in real time. And at the end of the day, we're in an industry that's dealing with compressing margins. I'm afraid, it's squeezed us in the past 20, 25 years. Everybody knows that. So we're all facing those pressures as well. Even the tech providers in this space, because of the limited funding, depending on who you're selling to,
Right.
what budgets they have now, it's far different from 20 years ago. So, I think that's where you're seeing a lot of the changes happen. But it's really the reverse prospecting that needs figured out, and that ownership and that communication. And Suzi, I remember conversations we would have 20 years ago about this.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, yeah. And we've been working hard on developing that system for that reverse prospecting. And
Yeah.
I think that's one of the key features that we added to the exclusive
Hmm.
listings platform,
Yep.
is just having that availability to connect it with your CRM, because your customers are doing things. They're searching for homes,
Right.
whether you've connected with them in the last 6 months or not. They're still active. So by having that reverse prospecting, that's right
Yeah.
there in your face on who's looking.
And I'll add something to that too, because you get into buyer intent, not to throw in marketing terms or whatever, but or data analytic terms. But when I see some of the numbers being thrown around by some of the people in the space, one sticks in mind. I don't know how accurate this is. Hey, we have 60 million buyers. Well, no, they don't. They really
right.
don't. Just saying how many users you have, those aren't, they don't have intent of buying.
Right.
Yeah, when
Just
when
because,
4.1 million homes sold, so 8 million people bought or sold last year, you don't have 60 million buyers.
no, no. And it's, so there's a lot of data science that goes into intent and buyer intent based on behavior. And, so we spent a lot of time on that end of things, because you don't want to waste a lot of time either, which is why I think the off-market listings have become popular, because the sellers, this was Andy. This was more common in our market for the $1 million plus listings, because you had sellers didn't want to deal with a bunch of buyers coming
Well,
through
right.
the
It was a curated experience.
Yes.
There was, and that's the other thing that infuriates me about this whole off ML, because it's not off market.
It's
And
off
I
MLS.
think words matter, because it's
Yeah.
off MLS, and that's
Yeah.
really where the biggest rub between Zillow, who's now a broker, who needs it to be in the MLS to have complete data,
Right.
and the MLSs themselves have the big decision of, are they going to continue to perpetuate status quo, or are they going to be leaders in this space and start working on policy that's going to cooperate with the
Right.
brokerage community in today's world? But this idea of off MLS listings, it does create a curated experience.
Hmm.
There are reasons why somebody wants
Yes.
privacy. There are, it's not just the stigma of pricing. And oh, by the way, the retail industry has been doing soft launch pricing studies for years and
Forever.
years and years, and
Right.
nobody complained about the lack of transparency for consumers. So
Right.
I think that's nonsense too. But I really get frustrated with this all or nothing, debate where there's absolutely no way that in no circumstances could a seller ever be fully informed and have informed consent and want an off MLS listing strategy. No way. No,
Right.
that's nonsense, right? So, the idea of a curated experience, I think also comes to the conversation of professionalism in the real estate industry.
100%.
Because if you have a good network of agents and you are well thought of in the real estate market and you're curating good listing, inventory, there are going to be buyer's agents that are going to want to bring their buyers to do business with you. So there's not enough of the conversations of the practice of real estate that surrounds, a very data heavy kind of, influx of noise and things. Suzi, I have a question for you. So, you and I have had a lot of off camera sidebar conversations. Cutting through the noise, what do you think is the best opportunity for Cutler Realtors right now, with all this debate about listing marketing and reverse prospecting and access to listings and inventory? What is the number one thing that you see is the best opportunity for Cutler Realtors?
So I honestly think, and I've explained this to you, it's coming up with your strategy. It's not going out and just, oh, they're doing this and they're doing this and I should do this and I should do that. It's your strategy. It's your consumer. You have to follow that strategy. And I think that we are making some headway with helping our realtors create that strategy. I think it's huge for Cutler to own its own listing data. So I want to, because you have to pivot, right? Things do change. And we just have to be in a position to change with it if we see the need to. So that just becomes a cultural decision, becomes a company decision, and then it becomes the realtor's decision, as well as the customer. And the customer dictates, what we're going to do, and then we'll just be ready to do it. So does that answer that?
Yeah, you did. I agree. The one thing that's interesting, in Ohio, we don't compete with Compass yet. I think eventually we will, and that's fine. They're a good broker, and we always rise to the occasion and know what our value is in that competition. But the one thing I think has recently been interesting is that Robert Refkin, CEO of Compass, has pivoted to the argument of fulfilling fiduciary duty as opposed to MLS governance and rules. And, I am a big advocate of leaning into, I don't think real estate, residential real estate leans into the fact that we are one of only 3 or 4 industries that are a fiduciary. Right. And that's an interesting concept of fulfilling your fiduciary duty above all else. You're legally obligated to do, to fulfill your client's needs and wants. So when you say, Suzi, when you say, okay, well, we want to do what's right for the client and we want to be guided by the client, why is understanding the value of listing data one way that you're going to be putting how does that put the client in the center of the transaction, or how is that fulfilling our fiduciary duty?
Well, you're giving the option to your client when you're going on your listing appointment. You're talking about office exclusives, you're talking about pre-marketing, you're talking about coming soon, and you're working together with that seller to understand what that means and let them come to the decision of what they want to do and what works best for them.
I think it's great. I mean, the individual strategies I think is perfect because real estate is local, right? I mean, we know that, Mike, you were talking about 60 million buyers. I think Zillow advertises that they have 260 million unique visitors, and there's 350 million people in the United States. It's like when you go here, it sounds impressive, but really ultimately it's about individual relationships. And that's the other thing that I think is interesting is the concept of reverse prospecting and where
Mhm.
what that means for a very analog customer one-to-one relationship. Where we can use reverse prospecting, we can use AI, we can use some of these other tools and strategies, even a two-tiered or three-tiered marketing system for listings. But it really just comes down to relationships, right?
Yeah,
That's
I would.
exactly
Can I
right.
add something to that?
Yeah,
I think it's,
absolutely.
Andy, I would even argue it's not just local, it's hyper local. And I know that's a thrown around term, and it has been for decades in our space, but real estate is hyper local. If you're selling in a particular subdivision or an area or neighborhood, however you want to phrase it, depending on your market, there's only a finite number of people looking to buy in that market. It's just, and as a home seller or a property seller and as a home buyer, you want to be dealing with someone that is knowledgeable in that hyper local market and not just on the recent transactions. That's only a part of the equation. I know every realtor knows that, but it's just, but I think that gets lost is just the knowledge of that market, what's happening right there, the trends, I mean, even in some cases, does the realtor live right there? And they know it. They know that hyper local market, and that's been going on for forever. So that type of knowledge has been happening all along, and we're not talking about that, which is interesting to me.
Well,
Because
but don't
if
you think we're not talking about it because it's not exciting? Like, I mean, I mean, I've said this a few times this year. I really truly believe, not just in real estate, but in many aspects of people's lives, there's going to be a trend towards analog because everybody is just digitally overwhelmed, right?
100%, 100%,
So you think about, all right, what's the most analog thing that you can do in real estate? And you can
right,
just get, and it sounds cliche, one-to-one, belly to belly with every one of your
100%.
sphere of influence and clients. And we talk about that here, that if you're able to do that, you're undisruptible. There's nothing that
Yes,
can disrupt you. But no one's
including
talking,
AI.
including
Yes,
AI, right?
Including
yes,
AI.
But nobody's talking about it because
no,
it's not exciting.
right.
It is very basic. It is very boring, and I say it, and I'll keep saying it until the last person hears me. I want your business to be boring and your life to be exciting.
Yeah.
So how do you make something very analog and
Hmm.
very back to basics exciting? I know this is getting off the MLS, question and the listings question, but if it is all about clients, what are some of the ways that you can leverage technology to make something very basic exciting?
Yeah, I mean, I can answer that because I've thought about this a ton. You mentioned something about, going analog. I joke. I just said it last week on vacation. If I didn't have a tech company, I'd probably have a flip phone. I mean, think about that for a minute. I'd have an old Razor phone or something that just can do calls. That's
You and
it.
me both.
And it's because really the number one thing that realtors could be doing and should be doing to I'll say to avoid the AI tsunami, because it is. I'm telling you, it's a tsunami. What you think is a tsunami now, you have no idea. For those in the weeds of it, but the realtors that know the markets, they're involved in those markets, and the people in those markets, and you're involved in the people in those developments, or in that world, so to speak. If you serve a farming community, that you're in the farming community, where there's no subdivisions, just massive farm. But if you're truly involved, going back to what realtors are good at, it's those relationships. It's that they're involved with people's lives. They know what's going on with them. I mean, I was on vacation in Florida, ran into a realtor from here down there on the streets of Florida, literally, and just talking business a little bit. But the love of the business, it boils down to people. It's not that they love the house. It's not that they love the transaction per se. Matter of fact, that's a headache sometimes. They deal with the headaches, but they love the people
Yes.
and they love the business and people moving and that aspect of it. So I think the ones that are successful will be doubling down on truly understanding the people in the markets, understanding those markets, being involved in those communities, and technology frees them up more to do that. That's so it's not working harder or more. It's just doing more of what you love and I guess plugging into the tech to get what you need out of it is the way I'll
Hmm.
phrase it.
I love that. Any other thoughts, Susie?
No, I think that's great. Just adopting the tech that works for you to free up
Yeah.
some of the mundane pieces, parts, but it definitely will never um, replace the people to people. I mean, we have realtors, generational realtors that they're they worked with the grandmother when they bought their first house. They work with the daughter, the granddaughter. Now they're seeing grandkids. I mean, they're just I think that's a really special profession.
I do. I agree. Well, and it does take, it goes back to a lot of the themes that we're talking about and cutting out the noise, but really taking the long view too. And I think with all of the things that are happening right now, you can get caught up in the moment and really, question your relevance and stuff. But everything that's happening in the economy, everything that's happening with AI, everything that's happening all around the debate over off MLS listings and stuff, it really plays to professionals. People that, once again, I go back to fiduciary duty, people that lean into that concept and actually practice real estate. Um, these things, these adjustments are going to be very easy because it is all about people. It's all about those relationships. The people that are trying to cut corners and find ways to leverage technology to make this business easy. This business is not easy. This business is actually very difficult, and the most difficult part of it, and which is why I don't think AI is ever going to disrupt real estate agents, is because we're dealing with the largest financial investment in most people's lives, and we're dealing with a lot of emotion and that it requires emotional intelligence, intuition, creativity, negotiating skills, all of those things. So I do think it's all about relationships. With, once again, why I think it's so fascinating why no one's talking about the consumer in this entire debate. I mean, all the talk of the consumer really is just self-serving for whatever party's spouting off on social media. The last thing that I want to talk about before we wind up our time today, I would like to have both of your opinions on what the future of the MLS is for residential real estate.
Gosh.
Oh boy.
I think I would have liked to have been prepared with that question
I know,
earlier.
that's why I sprung it on you. I want this to be candid. This doesn't have to be. I mean, we're not. I mean, what's your impression? Because I think we're in a watershed moment for institutions in residential real estate. I don't think we've gone all the way with NAR's reckoning. I think that there's a lot of debate on national, state, and local associations,
Mhm.
and I think that MLSs have a lot of soul searching to do. But we're
I
talking
think they're
about.
losing their footing.
So tell me a little bit more about that. Why do you think that?
I do feel like they're losing their footing. So yes, we have rules. I don't know how they're going to, I really don't know how they're going to enforce them and police the clear cooperation 24-hour without, uh, I just don't know how they're going to do it. Um,
Well,
and
it's
I see
how.
that if they don't come up with something fantastic, this is just going to continue to branch off to where, like we saw my state MLS where you don't even belong to the board and you just enter your listing and blah, blah, blah. Which it's kind of like a wild, wild west show without them. So I do like the MLS because of the rules, but I just don't know how they're going to enforce it. So I feel like they're losing their footing.
Here,
Right.
can I this is $1 million question, Andy. I need to be careful how I word this.
Okay.
Had I been prepared for this, literally on my bookshelf over there, I have technical documents from the late 90s where we had developed a national MLS platform that would replace the MLSs potentially, but it built a national, and by the way, the system was built it was built at the end of, it was ready to launch at the end of 1999,
I
and it was
remember.
shopped to realtor.com at the time, but it was during the dot-com bubble when it had burst, and realtor.com did not purchase it. So, but so this started almost 30 years ago, this conversation. And what kicked off the conversation was over money. Because at the time, the MLSs were compensated for listings to be put onto Realtor.com, anywhere from roughly $1 to a few dollars a listing. And the industry itself did not see that money. And the whole thing was your listings are being monetized. You're doing the work, you're getting the listings, and then other people are taking the money. So fast forward to today, we have what, roughly half the MLSs, maybe less than what we had 25 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So consolidation is happening. Consolidation will continue to happen. I don't know if we will ever see what I would call a national MLS. Our model was to put the large brokerages in control, to put the industry back in control of their own listings, to where you were entering your own listings into your own system. And then if the MLS wanted it, they would pay for it. I mean, but it took control back for a good reason for the industry. That's, you guys are doing the work and other people are monetizing on all your work. And so I think at minimum, you're going to continue to see consolidation. I think it'll roll up to at least the state level, in some cases, a regional level that's multi-state. I don't know how it's sustainable. I would also add, I think with a lot of the technology changes, the compliance issues, if you will, or the compliance topic that the MLSs tend to police, that's being addressed to where they're not needed for that. I don't know, I mean that in the most respectful way, but to ensure compliance, I'm talking about rule breakers, just people unintentionally doing things, so to ensure that compliance on a state, local, regional level. So I don't know how it plays out, but I do know control is changing. And from a technology standpoint, we're at the point it is very easy to launch a national MLS, but then you get into clear cooperation, all those, access all those things. So I don't know if that answers your question. I don't know if but
no, I think it does. It answers my question because it's not a one answer question, and I think both of you in different ways, spoke to the complexity of the challenge. On the one hand, I think it would be a disaster if MLSs went away completely, and for years the MLSs hung their hat on data quality and data standards,
mm-hmm.
and that doesn't exist anymore. We can get everybody has great data sets now,
right?
So what is the value of the MLS? And I think the interesting thing, and this kind of conversation got quiet relatively soon after the lawsuit settlements, but we as brokers, we all were all of a sudden really, really put front and center on being able to articulate our value in the real estate transaction, right, especially when we have to have a conversation with both a buyer and seller to be paid directly.
Can I add something to that, Andy?
Sure.
I think, what you bring up there is a 1,000,000% valid point in the recent settlement that happened and the lawsuits that the industry went through that still aren't gone, by the way. It still
right.
is not done. It really opened the industry's eyes quite a bit, because a lot of brokerages were left out of the settlement in a large way. And so then there's a lot of questions circling of, okay, I'm part of all these things. I'm paying, I'm a member. Where are my protections? I followed your rules, and now I'm financially penalized for following your rules and regulations. And it really starts to question the whole ecosystem. But it's a very complex matter. It's not simple.
It is, and and I think at the fundamental level, the only place for MLSs, state associations to start is they need to understand what their value is and be able to articulate their value to the brokerage community. And rules enforcement and transparency and all of these things that this anti-consumer only in the MLS argument,
right?
I don't think clearly articulates the value, because there's value with the MLSs. There's a ton of value with the MLSs. But it has to be, they have to understand who their customer is.
Right.
I think that's sometimes confusing. And then they have to articulate their value to their membership and their customers. So I think it's going to be interesting. But I mean, I sprung it on you. I wanted to get your fresh reactions. But I think that it's something that should be contemplated because, there is so much going on, and unfortunately, I don't see a lot of leadership right now. A lot of strong voices that are talking about what this is going to look like for the future, for the brokers for the future, for the consumers for the future. It's a lot of, we're just going to wrangle and try to maintain, or we're so afraid of doing anything bold because we don't want to get sued.
Right.
And I think ultimately that's going to be to, organized residential real estate's detriment. But at the same time, it's going to opens the door to innovation, much like what you're talking about with somebody else walking in and creating another solution that preserves all the good things within the MLS, but maybe accelerate some of the regulatory things, for the 21st century.
Yeah, I think that's 100% what we're seeing it now. I think we're going to see that. We're seeing the early stages of it. I think that's going to accelerate. And I really do think then, how does that play out in the dues and subscriptions? Because there has to be something playing out in that area as well. With economies of scale and tech and automation. So we're definitely seeing changes in that area. And I think those are going to accelerate. But I agree with you too, Andy, that it's the complexity of it and the fact that it's change is really what slows it down. There's many of the mergers of the MLSs or consolidation that happens. They're years in the making. And then they finally happen. So, but I agree with you. We're going to see more of that just by the nature of tech.
So, final question. I appreciate both you guys joining me today. I think this has been a kind of a broad-ranging conversation, but certainly the good start to a conversation. I'm definitely going to want to, come back and revisit this in a few months. So, I'll ask each of you the same question as we wrap up. What's the biggest opportunity right now with all of the noise, with the current economy in the residential real estate market? What's the number one opportunity each of you see? Suzi, we'll start with you.
The number one opportunity that I see is, it still comes back to just do you, connect with your sphere, connect with your people, get yourself here, not here. And I think that's what builds your business.
Mike?
Yeah, so this is easy. It's the same thing I've been saying all the years I've been in this industry as a tech provider. So if you're a seasoned realtor with a database of past transactions, engage with your past people. Stay in contact with them. Those are your repeat transactions. Those are your relationships. If you're new to the business, make relationships that are genuine. And I'll add one last thing for both of them. Don't use AI to do automated follow-up with people because
they know.
I get some of that, and guess what? I block it.
Yep. Agreed.
I appreciate both you guys hopping on today. It's always great to brainstorm and get your perspective, Mike and Suzi. I know you don't love being on the camera, but I'm going to try to get you on the camera more and more because you're great every time you hop on. So thank you both. I really appreciate you, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks, Suzi.
Thanks.
See ya.
So George,
yeah,
that was a fun conversation for me to have with Mike and Suzi. As I said, it was a broad ranging conversation. We touched on the noise in the marketplace. We touched on off MLS strategies. We touched on the future of MLSs and, being focusing on hyper local real estate. What was the one thing that you heard that really resonated with you?
Yeah, I think it was actually two.
Okay.
Number one is relationships over real estate. I think that's really the backbone of a business. And I think it's beyond just relationships with your buyers and your sellers. I think it's really about also relationships with other agents and collaborating with other agents. If you're competing with other agents, you need to stop. You need to really collaborate with them. You need to listen to them. You need to work together, because I think that's where this is going. And it kind of dovetails into this off-market strategy. And I think that's where people are going, is like the MLS is almost like a second option or a backup option, fallback option, whatever you want to say, is because people are saying, I can get my seller premium price. I can get my buyer into a home without competition. And they're networking these with other agents and probably getting premiums on these homes that they wouldn't get on the MLS. And I think, as we discussed last time, when homes sit on the MLS, they're not going for the list price. You know, people start to look for things that are wrong with the homes. They start to negotiate, and it doesn't do the seller any favors. So people are like, why would we go with that as our number one strategy? And I think making sure that you're giving your seller options, as we discussed, is imperative.
So when you talk about the real estate community and cooperation versus competition, give me your point of view on what's the difference
Between collaboration and competition.
Yeah, when you say, well, if you're competing against the real estate community, stop right now. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I think it's, if you've got a buyer need or you've got an upcoming listing, share it with people before it goes to the MLS, because you could be getting work done on that house, paint, carpet, whatever it might be. And I think it's a chance for you to potentially network it to somebody who may have a buyer, who you're not waiting for it to go onto the MLS. You're working with other agents. They might have buyers. And we're seeing this all the time. You're talking about hypermarkets, specifically in Upper Arlington. It's happening all the time. We're having agents reach out numerous times a week and say, I've got a buyer need here. I've got an upcoming listing there. Do you have anybody? And people are sharing these things. And what it's doing is, I think if you don't have those connections, you're getting lost. You're not networking with these other agents, then why would somebody use you as their realtor?
So the argument about off MLS listings hurting sellers and hurting buyers because anybody that does an off MLS strategy just wants to double side the transaction. Is that what you're seeing? You know, the first 90 days of being focused in the hyperlocal market in Upper
I don't
Arlington?
think we're seeing much of the double side. I mean, it's certainly happening.
Sure.
It's certainly happening. But I think unless you just have a huge sphere or a huge network of buyers and sellers, the odds of you double siding are probably low. I think what you do is you reach out to the agents who sell in your area. Like specifically Upper Arlington, we've got, maybe 20, 30 agents that do a significant amount of business there, and they're reaching out to each other and they're collaborating on what the buyer and seller needs are. And I go back to, it gets the seller the premium price in some cases. And if it doesn't, the leverage is then you go to the MLS. I think people are using it as kind of the fallback. As I mentioned to you off camera, there was one that just came up last week in Upper Arlington. They had a $200,000 premium on the home when they were networking it to other agents. They didn't get that price, so they went to the MLS. And while it was in coming soon, they ended up getting an offer from somebody who saw it off MLS. And then they had to move up the coming soon period to allow other people in to see the home. And I think this is where this is going.
But even in that scenario, the level of competition among professionals seems to be finding its own level.
Correct.
As opposed to this fear that, we're just going to keep all of this inventory to ourselves and not be working for our seller's best interest or our buyer's best interest and so on and so forth.
Right.
So from that perspective, then the idea of cooperation really goes hand in hand with the professionalism that we talked about on the video and really elevating your game as a professional practicing real estate as opposed to just selling homes.
Correct. And I think it just goes back to options. There's no one size fits all model for when it comes to buyers, sellers. You need to listen to the client. And I think we've got one potential listing coming. It's a cream puff listing. And I think these are the ones that you definitely want to talk about off-market strategy, because there's not going to maybe be a ton of buyers for this home. And if we can network it with other agents at Cutler, one-on-one with other agents outside of Cutler, the odds of us bringing that buyer is higher than putting it on the market at that price, watching it build days on market, and then starting to get lowball offers.
Well, and that just goes, hand in hand with what Suzi said. You be you, like, individual strategy, because it isn't a one size fits all strategy. And we have a fiduciary responsibility, particularly to our sellers, of presenting to them all of the different options in terms of marketing, pre-marketing, off MLS marketing, ultimately to not just get the best price, but the best terms in the most convenient way possible.
Exactly.
And one of the other things that really resonated with me that you said was, okay, well, during an off MLS strategy, the sellers might potentially not have to do home improvements to command that top market price.
Exactly.
Because you can negotiate and build in the condition of the property into that off MLS strategy.
Yeah. So it's not just price to that point. I mean, I think sellers can name their terms in some ways, because the alternative is then they can go to the MLS. And I think it buys them time. We've never gone into a listing appointment with a seller and said, we'll market your home from day one through our Cutler exclusive listings, networking it to other agents on a one-on-one basis. And they said, no, just put it on the MLS. Not a single one has ever said that. And I think having more tools in your toolbox, it just helps. It just, like you said, fiduciary duties to the seller. Sellers want options. And I think if a seller could be getting work done or not doing work and saying, hey, if somebody's going to give me this price without having to do the work, fantastic.
Right.
And for a buyer, we've seen buyers more receptive to knowing this is the price. It's not going to be multiple offers. It's not going to go way over the list price. Be more receptive to actually paying that premium than they would if the home was on the market and there's multiple offers and then having to go so far above, because there's a little bit of an unknown. We put one in contract last week that went over list price. We didn't know how high it was going to go. We ended up getting it, but it's like if we would have known that price walking in from day one, they probably would have a lot more comfort level going into it and paying that price rather than saying, well, I think this is what I'm willing to pay, but I don't know.
Well, and that's an interesting point too. The idea that buyers that are being represented with well-networked buyers agents, where they're willing to pay a premium for an off MLS listing because they don't have the competition.
Correct.
That jeopardy in that conversation. I know we all have felt uncomfortable in some of those circumstances when we have to talk about appraisal gap waivers and inspection waivers and all sorts of things when you're
Just
in
win the deal.
that multiple offer situation, and there's so
Correct.
much pressure, that it's understandable that buyers would be willing to pay a little bit extra for the peace of mind of not being in
You're right.
competition.
They give up a lot when they go into the multiple offer situation. They're sometimes giving up the remedy period for sure. They may give up the inspection. Who knows? They have to do appraisal gap. They have to do a lot of things if they're going to go above list price. And if they know what the price is ahead of time, there's a lot more, I think, ease. But I also think it goes back to, if you're a buyer out there in the market, do you want to work with an agent who has access to these listings, or do you want to work with an agent who doesn't? And we are working with a client right now who we may put a house in contract as soon as today on an off-market listing that's never gone on the MLS that they wouldn't have found if they, I don't want to say working with us, but working with an agent who's well connected.
Yeah. Well, so what do you think? So when you say well connected, obviously I've said this a lot, that this market right now, with a lot of the economic factors that are happening, regardless of whatever strategy you use to list homes, this plays to the professionals. And you and I have talked about this off camera. The whole 80-20 rule's gone to 90-10, but in some cases, especially in hyper local competitive real estate market, it's almost 95-5, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So what would be the message to some people out there that may have been more competitive than cooperative, or, may be in an environment that they haven't received the level of training or that level of professionalism in the real estate community? What's your message to them, as that gap seems to be widening in some markets?
No, this is a great question. And this is why I think being at Cutler is an advantage. And this is not a Cutler commercial per se, but
I appreciate the commercial.
But I think having access to exclusive listings, this is another plug for that, is if you're a newer agent, I mean, you maybe don't have the relationships with other agents, or maybe don't have the buyer pool or whatever it might be, is to say, if you've got access, we've got, I think, 30 exclusive listings. I think at one time it was 40. Start there. Look at that. Look at that list. And when you post them on there, it's also going to, if you have loaded your CRM, it's going to give you what buyers you might have that fit these listings. And it's all about making those matches. And if you can do that, even if you're not well networked with other agents, even if you're not collaborating with other top agents, you have access to that pool of listings through the exclusive listings that I think is underutilized. And while we did see a huge bump, I think there's still plenty of opportunity to continue to post those.
Yeah. So, 90 days in,
Mm-hmm.
in our first podcast in January, we saw a 110% increase
Which is great.
in Cutler exclusives that first 90 days. But you and I were joking that we'd love to see another 110%
let's go.
increase in
Let's go.
Q2. But, I thought Suzi's point about reverse prospecting was super, super
Yeah.
interesting. And, if I could wave my magic wand, I would love all of our Cutler Realtors to load all of their buyers and utilize and leverage the CRM for nothing more than to be able to say to a seller or a potential seller, I have 15, 25, 40, 70 buyers that are interested in a home like yours. And I think that, Mike's point that regardless of if you're with a strong broker that understands the value of their data and their listing inventory and has control over it, you can leverage that potential reverse prospecting no matter what brokerage you're with. Where do you see the opportunities, and what would be the downside of really leaning in and fully leveraging that CRM aspect of the reverse prospect?
Well, I'm not sure I see a downside.
Okay.
That's one part. I think the output is only as good as the input. And if you're posting the exclusive listings, I know that when we post them, it's a best practice. We post every listing, whether the seller really wants us to or not. I mean, they always say yes, but we just do it kind of as a best practice. So as soon as we have listing paperwork signed, we post it. When I post it, or Suzi posts it, it goes out to all of the Cutler agents. We get a kickback that says there's 70 buyers in the CRM at this company that may be interested in this home. And then I know for a fact that we've had emails come back to us that say when somebody else posts one, here's 2 or 3 or 4 buyers that you have in your CRM that may be interested in purchasing this home. You naturally go and send it to them. And I think, having that access is huge. I think the other thing is you load your CRM, it takes some time. You load your exclusive listings, it takes some time. But if you can make these it's all about going back to making matches.
Yeah.
And being able to send something to a buyer who is looking on the MLS or they're looking on Zillow because there's only 2 places they can go, right? They go online. But to say, hey, look, I've got this, I've got that. These are listings that you wouldn't have access to if you weren't working with me. It makes me look really good.
Yeah.
And I think that you're showing them, I'm looking out for you. I'm giving you options. I'm giving you options outside of what you're conventionally going to see by just going online.
Well, and the other point to that effect that Suzi made is your clients, whether you have them in the CRM or not, are searching for homes.
No doubt.
So there is no downside. The only downside is not having them in your CRM and being caught off guard or finding out after the fact that they were searching without you, or they walked into an open house and fell in love. And, that's kind of the one thing that keeps most of us in the real estate business up at night is, oh my gosh, I would hate to hear that news. So, it really comes down to, even if you're not utilizing any other aspect of the CRM, just the fact that you have it in there, it kind of works on its own, especially with the Cutler exclusive strategy.
What kind of makes it an easy button for you? I mean, I think that, if you got your CRM loaded and you've got the exclusive listings and it's matching them for you, and you're getting an email that says, Betty Buyer, here's a great listing for you, you send it to them. I mean, you don't even have to look through, and you don't have to scroll through and say, hey, do I have a buyer for this one that they just posted? Do I not? Where is this area? It does the work for you if you load it and put in their preferences.
And that kind of goes back to leveraging technology so you can have more time with your clients and really nurturing those relationships.
Exactly right. It's doing like an MLS search. Like if you set up an MLS search for somebody and they get emailed results, it's basically doing that and telling you who to email about which listings. So it's the same kind of thing, but it's all off market. It makes you look smarter. And we talk about working smarter, not harder. This is a great way of doing that. But you got it's only as good as the input.
Yes. Yeah. So we had 110% increase the first quarter. Second quarter, I'd love to see 110% increase again.
If every agent posted one, we'd have 400. I'm not saying we're going to get that high, but I think we went from 15 to 30 to 40. And I think just keep posting them. I think at one point you'd mentioned, since our 90-day podcast that we had last time, that 6 of them went into contract with other Cutler agents. And I don't know what that number is now, but it's this is a great opportunity for Cutler to work with other talented agents.
Well, and going in and looking at it, to your point, there's no downside to it.
Right.
Whether you put it in as a Cutler exclusive for 3 days, for 3 weeks, just incorporating it, offering it as a standard of practice into your listing presentation, if nothing else, it's going to make you more relevant to your clients. And I would say this too, and this is one conversation I've had about office exclusives, about Cutler exclusives, is, well, they're a repeat customer, I don't need to do that for them. And I think that's a huge miss.
Yeah,
because you probably have not sold a house to them in 7, 8, 9 years. And just think about all the potential referrals that client could give to you.
Yeah.
But you're missing out on having the most relevant off MLS strategy as an option for, sellers in today's marketplace.
That's a great call, Andy. Way of staying in contact. It could be as simple as, hey, I saw this one coming in your area. Keep your eye out.
Yep.
Just to start the conversation. Like there was one coming in UA. I hadn't talked to this guy in over 2 years. And I said, hey, there's a house coming on your street. Just be prepared. It would be fantastic if we got this price. He's like, oh my gosh, thank you so much for letting me know. This would be amazing. I'll keep my eye out. And oh, by the way, I'd love to find something new. And so we're like, okay, what's your criteria? What are you looking for? And now I'm starting to send him some results that I wouldn't have had that conversation if I didn't just think about what's coming on his street. And I thought of him, letting him know that I was thinking of him and to keep an eye out for this listing. It can be as simple as that. Even if you don't know that they're looking, just I thought of you.
Sure.
And to be ready that this one's coming. You might be getting new neighbors, if nothing else.
Yeah. Well, but it's that. I think agents struggle sometimes when they haven't been connected with their sphere of influence or their clients. Well, what am I going to say? How am I going to have a conversation starter? Once again, this is just a built-in, relevant, hyper-local discussion point to start a conversation. Understanding that they may be just about to list their house and they haven't heard from you. And now this might be the tipping point for you to be able to be in on the conversation.
Exactly right.
So, on top of tripling our Cutler exclusives for April and May, what were your takeaways from the video today? And I know you and I, when we were watching the video, you had some thoughts about the future of MLS. You have any ideas or thoughts that you'd like to share?
Yeah, well, Suzi mentioned this, and I think it makes a lot of sense, is that they're losing their footing. And I would totally agree with that. I think when you're seeing, like at least in Upper Arlington, we have an agent that's posting every single day, it seems like, about an off-market listing that he sold, or he had an off-market buyer that he put in contract. This is happening more and more, and people are using the MLS, as I mentioned, as a fallback option. And I think it's going to continue to happen this way. It's happening organically. It's people putting their buyer and seller needs together in an organic way and using their networks. They're collaborating with other top agents, and the MLS is kind of like, well, if I have to go to the MLS, I'll go to the MLS. And I might not get the premium price. I might build days on market, but that's like my secondary option rather than my first option that it maybe used to be. So I think it's already losing ground. And I think it's kind of going to continue that way as agents continue to leverage each other. And people are using MLS as like, to a buyer, they're saying, well, if I don't get this price, then I'll go to the MLS and everyone's going to see it. So pay me this price now. And they're using it almost as like a leveraging tool. So,
obviously you and Suzi are top performers and focused very hyper local in your community in Upper Arlington. What would you change with the MLS? That would make it more relevant, more useful, and a more supportive platform for your business?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know what the unlock is. I just know that days on market only hurts listings. And I think that is maybe why there's some hesitancy for people posting them. Because if you're networking it one-to-one with other agents, you could be doing that for months. And it's not months of days on market on the MLS. So I think that's one drawback to the MLS, is that you see how long it's been posted. And all of a sudden, if you're past the 1 or 2 week mark of being on the market, the odds of you getting that list price is slim. And if you think about, if you're doing the off-market strategy and you fall out of contract, we had this happen before where we fall out of contract on an off-market listing, nobody knows about it. And so it's not like a scarlet letter of being on the MLS and guess what, it's back on the market. Now I'm definitely not getting the list price. Now somebody's going to lowball me, or what's wrong with that home? So there's some I don't want to say strategy behind going off market, but it's also saying like, I can do some of these things. I can negotiate the home. I can talk about remedies. And if I follow a contract, it's not the end of the world because no one else knows about it. And I think that there's some benefits to that. It's very public and out there on the MLS, and the days on market only hurts a listing. So again, to answer your question, I don't know what the solve is for the MLS, but I think there's a lot of regulation on there. I do think that it can be a little bit tough to navigate sometimes, especially for people who may prefer to look at Zillow. A lot of our clients are going to Zillow first, then we set up the MLS search. And while they can get emailed results, a lot of people are still looking at the MLS because they'll send us MLS links and they won't send us MLS links. So I think it's losing footing. And I just think that it's, I don't know, maybe a bit archaic, but I think that, you always have to innovate. Mm-hmm. And I think the MLS, for it to stay relevant, has to innovate, because if you don't innovate, you die. So that's my take. Great question.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great conversation.
Yeah, likewise.
So when you come back in July, when we go back and we continue to talk about the benefits of Cutler exclusives,
hopefully we see more.
Yeah. Well, we set the standard, so we want another 110 to 110% improvement. So that means that we need to hit the high water mark of about 90 Cutler exclusives.
Yeah, keep it going. And I would say, like, there was a comment made about the Cutler exclusive, it being an extra step. Or like if I'm already loading the MLS, but now I have to load it into Cutler exclusives. And I would just reiterate, it's like 3 or 4 mandatory fields. Like you put the address in, you maybe post a photo, you put the bedrooms, the bathrooms, the square footage. I mean, it doesn't have to be elaborate. You don't have to have professional photos. You don't have to have all the details. You don't have to have a description written. You could borrow the description from the last listing if you really wanted to. I mean, you can get creative and it doesn't have to be super involved. I think you're just letting everybody know in a brokerage of 400 agents that your listing is coming. And there's no harm, there's no downside in doing so.
Great stuff, George.
Cool. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this has been fun.
Good to be back.
Thank you, everybody. We are on the hour mark. Super fun to have this conversation. There is no downside. Talk about Cutler exclusives with your sellers. Talk about a 2-phase marketing system. Ultimately, the MLS is that fallback position to expose the property to the biggest pool of buyers. But depending on timing, depending on what you and your sellers agree to individually, Cutler exclusives are a great approach and a great way to fully represent sellers. Thanks, guys.